this computer, and we are recording. So thank you for joining us, everyone. This is our first attempt at our local author night via Zoom. So if you've been to one of our local author nights before, it's going to look kind of familiar and kind of not. Tonight, Roundabout Books is happy to present Cylvia Hayes. Cylvia is an award-winning public speaker, empowerment coach, new economy strategist, professional environmentalist, and former First Lady of Oregon. She is also a minister in training with Unity Worldwide Ministries. And tonight she's going to talk to us about her new book, When Life Blows Up, which is basically a memoir, but also a way to use kind of what you went through to help other people if they're going to go through something similar. But I don't want to speak for you, so I am going to go ahead and let you take over this and tell us about yourself and your book, and then we'll have some questions at the end.
Okay, so we're a very small group, and this is actually my very first book signing. I have a few lined up, and now they're all being moved virtual, so we'll see where that goes. So I thought you were going to ask me some questions, and then I was going to do some reading, but do you want me to just talk a little bit about it first, and then questions can pop up?
Yeah, I think let's if anyone has questions, you know, hold on to them. And I think maybe if you give us a little bit of the background, I'm sure most people are familiar with you, but maybe if they're not, give us a little bit about what brought you to write this book.
Well, crisis brought me to write this book. So my book is When Life Blows Up, A Guide to Peace, Power, and Reinvention. And I've been a writer for a long time, but it's my first actual legitimate book. I did a little gag book that is still out there, but this is a big one. And I talk about this for anyone who hasn't seen it. I did a TEDx Bend talk, but there was my life before October 7th, 2014, and my life after. And on that day, I got a call that a reporter had dug up some dirt from my past and was about to go public with that. And the reason it was just so like mind-blowingly terrifying is at that time, I was partner to the current governor of Oregon and serving as First Lady, and he was running for re-election. So I was basically what in politics they call the October surprise, the thing that gets dropped at the last minute to blow up a candidate's opportunity. And to nutshell it, we're such a small group. Erica, do you know anything about my story? Okay, I'll tell a little bit then. I know a few of the others on the call do. That wound up leading to FBI and IRS, Department of Justice investigations that went on for 2.5 years. The political opponents that put it into process used the blast from my past from almost 20 years earlier, which included having been involved in a green card marriage for money for college and being peripherally involved in a marijuana growing operation that I never went through with. They used those shady behaviors to launch a campaign alleging that the governor and I had misused our public positions for personal gain. And that's what launched the various investigations. 2.5 years into it, the federal investigators came back and said there's nothing here to file charges for. But by that time, a lot of damage had been done. And my book, specifically to that, well, let me take a step back and say, it's not certainly not the first adversity I've been through, but it was the most difficult because just everything involved, it was so public. And I was in my mid-40s, late 40s. And so it was my life that I thought had been on a certain trajectory was very suddenly and very publicly on a very different trajectory. And it was going to take a number of years for to sift through the uncertainty and be able to really land on what my new trajectory might be. Monica Lewinsky and I have had several phone conversations. That's how visible my public shaming was. I should note that John won re-election anyway, but resigned a few months later under the media pressure. And I will also, in that what sounds like such a dark story, note that I am genuinely happier, more peaceful, kinder. I was a nice person before, y'all. I was. Pretty much anyone who knows me would say that, I think. Maybe not my little brother, but everybody else. But I'm just much kinder now, much more willing to prioritize time for others, a lot less self-importance. It was a humbling for me in a really empowering sense of that word. So the book, this particular book, is the 4th complete draft. It took me 5 years to write this book, took 5 years to move through all of this and wrap all the legalities and everything that happened, and the Oregonian putting a lien on my house, which is just now getting wrapped up, all of it. My first draft, for the other writers on this call especially, my first draft, I'm so grateful. I had an agent. I had things moving. I'm so grateful that I didn't let it go, because my first draft really was an attempt to exonerate myself. And it was before the investigations had even dropped. And there was a lot of anger in it, a lot of finger pointing. And then slowly over time, I realized what really happened to me isn't what matters. What matters is what you can do with it and how it can benefit others. And that's where this book got to. So, and I'm blown away that it would take the timing of it, that it would take that long, and that I would drop a book of the title when life blows up just weeks before COVID hit. So it's catching some tailwind now, and I'm getting podcasts and things are moving. And I think some of the most useful stuff in this, and later, you can direct me for some readings or whatever, but really learning how to manage fear when you're sitting in prolonged uncertainty. I think I've gained a little bit of a superpower there. Learning to move forward through uncertainty, but also stay open to the possibility that the field of uncertainty provides. Those are some of the things. It's really just a very practical self-help book, and it also kind of chronicles the spiritual blowing open that happened for me during that time.
Would you say that this is just what you're saying is kind of inspiring me? When you stop trying to control everything as well, do you sometimes feel like things work better?
Well, I have a whole chapter called Redefining Surrender. And I had been a person who had been raised that when you got hit, you hit back. I was raised a rough little redneck tomboy. And I had been able, up until this point in my life, when hit with adversity, to fight back, to push through, to force the river when I had to. And then this hit, and there was just so much of it that was out of my control. And I had to, one of the biggest breakthroughs is I had to learn how to disconnect my inner state of being from the circumstances swirling through my life. That's one of the biggest evolutions for me that happened. And in the process of doing this and sitting in this for so long, I have definitely learned that there's so much we can't control. Mm-hmm. And often when we are willing to hand over that control, to just have some faith, to choose the lens that we put on certain events and circumstances, they come out so amazingly better than we might have planned for.
Yeah.
So this experience for me definitely got me to the place where when something happens, when I get a bill, when the car breaks, whatever, I have such a greater capacity now to go, all right, what's the opportunity here? What's the potential miracle here? You know, maybe this is happening for me and not just to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, we should all try that more often. I know that can be really hard for people to say, how can I use this? Or, you know, this isn't just a test, it's a learning experience. Did you find that writing the book, and you said your 4 different manifestations, I mean, obviously helped you process everything that happened?
Oh, definitely. So first and foremost, thank God I was already a journaler, because I journaled as the whole thing was playing out. And it was so stressful as it was happening that I never would have remembered many of the details. 85% of those are on the cutting room floor. I wound up not putting them in this draft, but I'm glad that I have them. Sometimes it was really difficult writing because it took so many years that I got to the point where I really don't want to be thinking about this shit anymore. Oh, by swearing on your show or on our event. I don't want to be thinking about it. But absolutely. And then the thing that's interesting now, especially as I was going through the edits, I love the process of writing. I love the editing. I'm one of those writers who, yes, you bang it out, you get it done. But what I really love is when you get to the point where you can go back and wordsmith and work with it. And it was very useful to go back and look at previous drafts and sort of notice my own release of anger, my own process. Very cathartic. Writing has always been incredibly cathartic to me, journaling or elsewise.
That's great. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions from our attendees. Everyone, you can either unmute yourself and kind of, I don't know, say your name, or if you're on camera, raise your hand. But do we have anyone who wants to ask a question of Cylvia? Let's see here. No? Wait.
So
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hi, Cylvia.
In full disclosure, I know everyone on this call except the host and Erica. So this is thank you guys for showing up.
So my name is Donna, and Cylvia happens to be my coach and my friend and fellow Unity participant. So I just had a question. You know, with what's going on right now, there's so many truths that are being seen for the first time. And I'm just looking at the whole thing that you went through with this journalist and the newspaper and the Oregonian and all of the things that you went through. I know that there are systems in place in journalism that supposedly protect people and really protect the reporter, because they need to tell the truth and they need to do it fairly and accurately. And we also know that, especially the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, however long, the amount of fake news and all of that. Is there a campaign or something in place that really can ensure that these things don't get repeated? Because this is such a travesty. It's such an insult to people, as you know, and it's so offensive and it's so damaging, and people get away with it. A good example, I guess, would be, you know, like something like TMZ, like they just go for the jugular and they just go for the gossip. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that's happening right now on a, you know, national scale to make the journalism situation better.
So sadly, no, not that I'm aware of. And one of the most disillusioning aspects of what I experienced, I had no idea that media could get away with that level of dishonesty and spin And if you are a public figure, which is really loosely defined, the way the libel laws are written, you have almost no recourse. It's why the National Enquirer exists. I mean, unless you have a ton of money, there's not much that you can do to get them even to correct. You know, the Oregonian, I finally had a colleague who was not a public figure. One of the little ripples in that, the Oregonian actually altered language in my emails and published it. They altered it several times, and I couldn't do much about it, but the person on the other end of the email could. And he finally wound up forcing them to do a retraction under threat of a defamation suit. But they fought that for 3 months. They fought for 3 months to correct a blatant and obvious misprint, or I guess intentional misprint, and there's just not much you can do about it. And sadly now, I don't want to take us too far off this path, but on things like election night, or even today, I was coming back from camping on Crooked River, and when I got back up, where I could get into my little satellite radio zone. I'm kind of a news junkie. I went back and forth because the first thing I plugged into was CNN covering a coronavirus update, and I plopped over to Fox just to see if they were even covering it, and they weren't. You know, and both of them are equally spun. So part of our challenge, right, if you plug back and forth between CNN or MSNBC and Fox on an election night, it is like jumping between parallel universes. And so it's a huge problem for us as people wanting to make our country and our world a better place. It's an enormous challenge. I'm actually of the opinion now, I think public media has never been more important. And I think that the relationship now between for-profit corporate media and political electoral politics, I think it is so unhealthy. I don't really believe that for-profit corporate media can be unbiased anymore in this model. We need an entirely different media model. So
it's kind of reminds me of a dangerous game of telephone, like when we were kids and we had the paper cup and the string. You know, it's just like a dangerous, mean-spirited way. And the saddest part of it for me is that the truth doesn't get told, and the truth is ignored and pushed aside in the name of sensationalism. So thank you for writing the book, because I think it's a really, really important topic that so many people probably don't think they're affected by, but they are.
We're all affected by it. And I don't cover that much in this book, but I've spoken about it a little bit and will be more. I think that the current media, for-profit media model right now in our country and our world is one of the biggest dangers before us.
So Marilyn does have a question. Marilyn, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Okay.
Cylvia. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for writing the book, and I think this version is much more readable and more pertinent to what's going on for other people. I think it turned out fantastic. My question is, and this is a different topic, is where do you think ego and the separation of ego fits in general spirituality?
Just drop me a little small topic there, Marilyn. Marilyn was one of many friends and colleagues who even did some reading of early drafts on it. So thank you for that. And I also, does everyone on the call know about A Course in Miracles? Shake your head if you don't. Okay. A Course in Miracles is mind-blowing, and I talk about it in my book. It is basically sort of almost a revised version of the Bible, if you will. It's a spiritual work that came out in the 50s through the 70s, kind of got put into play, and it's a year-long program, daily exercises, huge text, that turned my world upside down. And honestly, it deals very much with the concept that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And early on in this human experience, we start to create an identity to move through and navigate this world. And that is what the Course would call ego. And the more strongly we identify with ego, the further we get away from our truer, fuller identity. And the understanding of that is really I believe the whole purpose that I went through, the ordeal that I went through, was to come to that realization. So, and I believe, to a little bit more directly hit on Marilyn's question, I don't want to be like the vice president was today in answering the question, you're telling us all to wear masks and yet you had a rally in Oklahoma. I listened to that today. He did not have a good answer. I think that what we're witnessing right now in our world is exactly that. I think we are at a pinnacle of ego / personality that feels itself separate, doesn't understand the connection to source and to creation that we all are and innately have. It's at the helm in a number of our major countries and institutions, and is playing out in a pretty catastrophic way. So, I personally, I'm excited. I don't mean this callously, but I'm excited about the times that we're encountering right now, because I feel like, both as a person who has had some insight into the cost of ego, my own particularly, and also as a person who has fought for 25 years to bring about a saner relationship with environment in the world we live on. I think we're at an inflection point. I think we're at a point right now where I don't think COVID broke the economy. COVID just revealed what was broken in the economy. And same with racism in this country. And so I find hope in that. And I think maybe we're either at an evolution or a devolution point.
Yeah. Wow.
Marilyn, did that answer that very well?
Well, I kind of wanted you to relate it back to your book, because I remember reading about that in your book. And I was wondering if having a separation of ego allows a person to move forward after a time of chaos and crisis.
Well, thank you for bringing me back to the book, because I went off on the macro, which I do a lot. Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think the main theme through my book is what happens when your ego identity just gets shattered, and how do you move through that, which is exactly what I went through. And I think it is the destruction of many people. It is also the expansion when you lean into it. And that fortunately and gratefully is what I was able to do. And so for me, there's a section in my book where I talk about how a lot of people, when they go through something like this, they talk about finding themselves. Or finding God, excuse me. They talk about, this is the thing where they got spiritual and they found God. For me, I believe I found myself. And in the process, I redefined God, because I have now, and I am now making big progress in moving through and past the notion of being separate from creator, source, one another, etc.
Very good. Very nice.
All right. Do we have any other questions? We have Karen that's joining us via her phone. We have Erica. Anyone with a question? Well then, Cylvia, would you do us the honor of maybe reading a small section? I don't know, maybe the intro or something that you feel comfortable reading?
Sure. And you all are my first time reading from my own book, and I actually worked on this a little bit while I was out camping. It feels odd to read from my own book, so it's kind of sweet that it's just...
Oh, what happened?
Hold on. Oh, Cylvia, hold on just 1 second. You got muted. Oh, there you are. Okay,
there I am. There I am. I think I brushed a pine needle off my laptop. I'll read you a little bit from chapter 3 because as I was out sitting next to the river preparing for this, it struck me that in these times that we're in, because those of you who have read the book know that I talk about the concept of a liminal phase. And the liminal phase was originally a term used in anthropology when they were studying indigenous cultures that had real rites of passage. So like at a certain age, all the girls are taken out of the community and stripped of their identity as girls. They go through an initiation phase, and when they come back in, they're young women. Or same thing with boys, go off and get circumcised, whatever it is. You know, they come back, they're stripped of the role that they had in community, and then they go through a while before they know what the new role is going to be. That is a really tremendously difficult place for a human psyche to exist in. And that's what we go through when we get knocked off our old identities. And that can be something as crazy as a massive public shaming. It can be loss of a job. It can be death of a spouse. The position that you held is shaken. Well, right now, in what we are going through in our world, there are millions of people, individuals, out of work, whatever it may be, business is failing, whatever it may be, millions of people in their own loved ones dying, in their own liminal phases, and our whole society is in a liminal phase, right? There's all of this unrest, and America's not going to be what it was prior to COVID, prior to whatever. So I talk about that. I think it's a geek in me. I don't know if people love that liminal thing as much as I do, but so I'll read a little bit about redefining surrender, and this is chapter 3. And I'll read a couple of pages, not very long, and then I think I have one other little piece I'd love to read as well.
Okay.
So I start with a quote by Viktor Frankl. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. With those events that shake us to the core, there's much more to it than just making it through the initial blast. The aftershocks and uncertainty can last long after the original event and leave a lot of debris in their wake. In some ways, the months just after the immediate crisis can be the most difficult. When the adrenaline and need for immediate action passes, we're left with fewer distractions from the loss and grief, and the demons of defeat, hatred, guilt, and despair have more room to run. I'll put a little side note in there. I heard recently that right now, in the COVID phase, we're sort of all in this liminal, and it's like we have the choice of becoming a chunk, a drunk, or a hunk. So kind of depending upon how we navigate our liminal phase. So just put that out there. Reading on. In anthropology and the culture of cultures, I'm going to skip this because I just read this to you. That's the part about the cultures where they have rites of passage. More recently, liminality has crossed over from anthropology into psychology and is used to describe when a person suffers a major life upheaval that shakes him or her loose from their old familiar position in community or society. It's usually about very challenging space for a person to remain in. The sense of liminality, of being in between the old and new way of being, often hits us when we experience sudden intensely life-changing events. This can happen when a young person moves off to college, when we retire from a career, when someone gets released from prison, or when we suffer a serious prolonged illness, the death of a loved one, a loss of social standing, or bullying and ostracism. I was a couple of months into my public shaming experience when someone first shared the term liminality with me, and I cried as I recognized and resisted the space I'd been forced into. On some subconscious level, I was terrified that the upheaval and uncertainty would be permanent, and I'd be trapped in a purgatory of pain and isolation for the rest of my life. Author and meditation teacher Madison Taylor wisely observed that the term dark night of the soul is overused and misused. The dark night of the soul isn't just about depression or confusion, but rather it's the place where our lives and much of what we thought we knew get turned upside down. It's wildly uncomfortable and can be terrifying. Taylor writes, "We're suddenly shut off from what we thought we had realized, and the emotional pain is very real. We may even begin to feel that it was all an illusion and that we are lost forever in this darkness. The more we struggle, the darker things get, until finally we surrender to our not knowing what to do, how to think, where to turn. It's from this place of losing our sense of ourselves as in control that the ego begins to crack or soften, and the possibility of light entering becomes real." A couple more paragraphs. "My experience was more like 1,000 dark nights of the soul as the legal and financial challenges dragged on and media attacks continued for more than 4 years. For the first many, many months, I was deeply disturbed and often depressed as the train wreck of public shaming careened through my outer life, leaving carnage of my career and reputation. The hatred toward the reporters who had spread the false allegations and fabricated a narrative about me seared my psyche, and the sense of having been defeated pummeled my already shattered sense of self-worth. When I really paid attention to the overwhelming powerlessness, it terrified me and brought to the surface the unthinkable fear that perhaps I really had been destroyed and really just didn't realize it yet. I reached some terrible depths during those times. Who the hell was I if I'd never known myself at all? What if everything I'd ever believed about anything that mattered had been wrong? What if I really wasn't of any value to the world? Was I indeed losing my sanity? As someone who had derived much of my own sense of worth through validation from others, there could have been no hotter crucible than an intense, prolonged public shaming. Everywhere I turned, I was being told I was no good, of no real value. Every old, buried, and disguised demon of self-doubt reared up, clawing and gnawing my psyche. I felt trapped in the wreckage of my life with no visible escape route. Although I never genuinely contemplated or planned suicide, I did many times reach the point where I truly didn't want to wake up. It felt like what I would have to face to make it through was just too hard. But as hard as it was, I could not tolerate the thought of adding additional trauma to John, my husband, or abandoning my beloved Tessa dog, with whom I had an incredibly tight friendship and bond. I couldn't give up, even though I didn't feel like going on. Thank God, in the resiliency muscles I'd already developed, underneath the despair was a tendril of curiosity. The sheer enormity of the mess and devastation of life as I knew it was so shocking and unforeseen, I sensed there had to be some reason, something to be gained from it."
Wow.
Up there.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Karen, hold on just one second. So Karen, if you'll unmute your phone. Yeah, did you have a question for Cylvia?
Hey, hi, Cylvia.
Hello.
I have to say, as a student of A Course in Miracles, that your experience has made you the most fascinating facilitator. And I've learned so much. And, you know, one of the tenets of the Course is every act that you do is either an act of love or a cry for love. And it's how we respond. If I perceive someone is attacking me and I defend myself, then you got your tit for tat, and it's never over. You know, you think of England and Ireland and the Palestinian, you know, it's never over. When I was able like one time somebody was very rude or whatever, and instead of responding as if I'd been attacked, I'm like, oh, you having a bad day? You want to talk about it? And the whole energy shifted. So, and one of the ones I started highlighting at one point, where you said my evolution required longer incubation. Had the catastrophe resolved sooner, I would have been like a butterfly pulled prematurely from the chrysalis with wings too underdeveloped and deformed to ever fly. And that I found, and I'm sure other people as well, just so encouraging, because it just enhances the upside. You know, it's going to be that much more powerful. It's like I've heard of people that were channeled that died and had horribly painful lives that they said yet was worth it for what came out on the other side. So I think people need to just appreciate that and not get so overwhelmed, you know, with where they are.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I've never been a patient person to a fault, and I still, it's still something I'm working on. And there were so freaking many times in this process where I would get, like, something would happen and it would look like, in fact, it would look like, okay, this legal thing is going to wrap up. This piece is going to be done. And then it would get prolonged again. And it was out of my control. And those were most often the times that would put me back into what I would call a little stretch of my dirty bathrobe on the couch days. Those were the ones where it was just like, screw it. I am just giving in and binge watching TV or whatever it was. But the truth is, I fully believe I never would have reached the launching point for the growth that I'm in right now had it moved more quickly. I was just too stubborn. I was too willful. I was too ego identified without realizing it for that to happen otherwise for me. So, and I look at that, you know, again, I look at it with what we're going through right now in our world. And it's kind of like a lot of us, most of us, I would say, are ego addicts without knowing it, because it's just the norm. And when an addict wants to come off an addiction, they need a certain length of time in treatment for it to work. And I think that that's possibly what's going on in the prolonged challenge we're having in our society right now as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Karen. Oh, hold on. Yes. Marilyn, you have another question or comment? Let's see. Yeah.
Yes. So I think the other thing that this book could be useful for is people not necessarily having to have their life blown up in such a dramatic fashion, but even just a career change, or, you know, problems in a relationship or problems in friendship. I think it's a good foundation for growth and change.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the challenges in writing it was not very many people go through thank God, such a public blow up, but many of us go through huge unexpected life changes. And one of the things that I found incredibly useful for me, and that virtually every coaching client that I've worked with, it's been useful for them, is really, and I have a whole chapter on it, it's about really empowered re-entry. How do you re-enter into the workforce, into dating, whatever? How do you actually, there are myriad ways we can tell our stories that are all true, right? So how do you find an empowered one? How do you move forward in picking up after life throws you an unexpected shift in a way that helps you move to the next chapter? And that's a lot. That's really the kind of the bulk. The book really is about, it's designed as in, how do you survive in the blast zone? How do you go through cleaning up the blast zone in a way that moves you toward empowerment? And then how do you come through the blast zone in a way that launches your next chapter in an empowered way? So appreciate that.
That's great. Yeah, this sounds like I would really like to have you at the store when we can do in-person events again, because I think that there's a great many people who would want to talk to you about this subject. So we'll definitely look into that. And hopefully those of you who are local will be able to join us sometime soon in the store for events. Do we have any last questions for Cylvia before we maybe get wrapped up?
I just want to make a comment. I just really honor you, Cylvia, for the resilience and the fortitude and the courage and the bravery that you exemplify, because I was just thinking, in 6th grade, I was falsely accused of cheating on a test and I didn't. And I just still, like, I wish I could tell the teacher, she's long gone. And just to hold what you've held and then come out of it the way that you're coming out of it, you easily could have crumbled. You easily could have raged at the world. And instead you went through this and came out as a champion. So, you know, I just have the highest regard for you. And I really do believe that this platform of truth telling and journalistic integrity is a really important thing to follow up on.
Yep.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting. I love your bookstore.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. And I would just say all the best to you at Roundabout Books. For God's sakes, it was hard enough for independent bookstores before COVID.
Yeah.
So I would love to do an in-person, and however, and also just love to get word out and help you guys move through this as well, because independent bookstores are kind of like independent media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very important. Really super important.
So with that, this video will go up on YouTube, and I will share it via our social media. So if anyone sees it and wants to reshare it on, you know, Facebook, Twitter, please do that. You know, obviously that helps Cylvia with getting her book out there, also with our store. We have another local author night in about a month on July 24th, where we will have Erica Knighton and some of our other local writers hopefully joining us either in person or via Zoom. We're still kind of figuring that out. If you haven't already ordered your book, sorry, Cylvia, I just had a total, say the title again for me, please. So
When
sorry.
Life Blows Up, a guide to peace, power, and reinvention. No problem.
When Life Blows Up. Please give us a call at the store. It's 541-306-6564 or roundaboutbookshop.com. Cylvia is local, and so if you buy a book, we can always figure out a way to get it signed, because that's, I have a section on my shelf now of signed books, and it's my favorite thing. I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to meet with us tonight, to explain your book, to, like Dee said, to just tell us your truth of these things that some of us do remember seeing in the news, and, you know, obviously only heard one side of it. We're very excited to hear the other side, the correct side. And thank you everyone for taking the time to join us via Zoom. I know everybody's got a lot of Zoom events they're being invited to, so we really appreciate that you chose ours. And I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up unless anyone had any final questions, comments, anything.
Sounds great. I'm just so grateful for all of you for spending some time and being Zoombies with me.
Well, I hadn't heard that.
Oh yes, we've all turned into Zoombies. We have to be very careful of this.
All right. Well, excellent.
I think Karen had something though.
Oh, I was just going to say that I'm so sorry I didn't buy the book from you and I got it from Amazon because I can't stand the thought of supporting it. But
it's
I need
okay. In the long run, we really appreciate that you're buying an independent author's book as well, because we need to support authors who are published any way they can be. So we're just happy you got her book. But in the future, give us a call.
Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
I did go on Amazon, but then I bought it from another seller, not from them. So that assuaged my guilt of supporting that energy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Stay cool. Stay safe. Stay healthy. We'll see you soon.
You. Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.